What's up?
What's up, man? Hey, Denise. Thank you for coming.
So this is a real privilege for me. I've been a Foursquare user for a long time. I have about 2,300 check-ins, and we're going to get the state of location. So how many locations around the world do you have right now?
Gosh, I might have lost track at this point. I want to say we're probably close to 30 million crowdsourced locations. That's people all over the world checking in at places and really just adding places from scratch. Like when we started, we had a very limited data set of a couple thousand venues, and everyone else in the world has kind of filled in the blanks for us.
How many users?
We are just north of 15 million users now.
And how many check-ins per day are they making?
Check-ins per day, I believe we're seeing over 4 million on a regular basis.
How many offers?
How many offers? We've got, this is rapid fire, we've got 600,000 merchants that are using the platform at this point.
Do you know how many servers you're using to serve this out?
Well, just about everything we're doing is on EC2, and we're getting to the point where it's getting really expensive. So we're starting to look into that as well.
Okay. I know somebody who can help.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
How many API calls are being made on the platform?
It depends on how you cut it up. I just texted Naveen from backstage, and I heard the latest number was about 170 million per day.
Wow.
So, yeah, the thing is, it's growing like a weed. I mean, we were here last year in the middle of the blizzard, which was a lot of fun. I think we spoke 3 times on 3 different panels because a lot of people couldn't make it. But no, it's just like the growth has been incredible, and a lot of the growth that we're seeing now, it's happening. It's happening. Well, it's happening in the U.S., but it's also happening internationally. So about 50% of our usage is outside of the U.S. at this point. We're seeing huge growth in Southeast Asia. Europe is holding very strong, and we're seeing really great growth in Brazil right now. Brazil's kind of off the charts.
Yeah. Tell me about the competitive landscape. We're really at the end of the first chapter of location-based services. Gowalla just got bought by Facebook and took their service down, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what is the landscape now for competition for Foursquare?
It's funny, I always think of like milestones as South by Southwest, that conference in Austin. So we launched in South by Southwest 2009, and that's where a lot of these other check-in services came from. Then in 2010, we met up with these guys again, and we're wondering, okay, who's going to come out on top? That was like the big location showdown. And then for 2011, we started pushing our agenda a little bit more aggressively, just because we had more people, we had more talented engineers, a lot of things we could do. And we started pivoting away from just being the check-in service when we launched our Explore functionality, which is the recommendation engine that's built off of all the check-ins that everyone's giving us. So the competitive landscape's pretty wide. I think that we've grown big enough that I'm not stressed about a lot of the smaller competitors. But we still have our eyes on like what Facebook's doing, what Google's doing, like what Twitter's doing with location. There's always Yelp to look at as well. So there's a lot of people in the space, because the space is pretty broad. It's like we're doing check-ins, we're doing deals, we're doing recommendations, we're trying to push people in interesting directions, like motivation for life. And so there's a lot of interesting areas there.
Yeah. And since we were here last year, you've added a few new features. Tell me about those and what you've learned in the past year from doing the new features.
Yeah, it's funny to think like all that's happened in a year, right? So we were here last December, and I don't know if we talked about it at the point, but that's when we were working on the Explore recommendation engine. And this is what we announced at South by Southwest in March, and it's the thing that I'm really most proud of, because I think we went through about 2 years of Foursquare where people thought that they were checking in for mayorships and points and badges, and I'm sure some of you guys have accomplished some of those things. But I think one of the things that we did when we launched Explore is kind of like, Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, right? So he's like teaching Daniel to kind of paint the fence, and he hates painting the fence, and all of a sudden he ends up learning karate. I feel like we kind of did that with Explore. Like everyone was giving us all these check-ins, and then we kind of launched this feature. It's like the check-ins weren't just for the badges. Like every time you tell us that you like to go to the sushi place, we get better about recommending you another place to go to. Every time you tell us that, hey, you're really good, or you know a lot about this area of Paris or this area of New York, we know that you're really familiar with that neighborhood, and we can suggest other things that you may not know about. Or we know like when you're in areas that you're not so familiar about, we can start offering things that help you out a little bit more. So I'm really excited about that agenda that we're pushing. I think the biggest thing that we've done recently is we launched this feature called Radar, which is our way of saying it's like that Explore recommendation engine, but it's a version of that that you don't have to ask questions to. Like Explore, if I want to take my phone out of my pocket and search for, coffee shop near LeWeb, it's going to give me a bunch of great recommendations. It's going to give me recommendations for art galleries and pizza places, but I have to ask Foursquare that question to get that result. And what we're trying to do with the radar feature is know about all the things that you like to do, and then as you start walking around, familiar neighborhoods or foreign cities, we can buzz your phone and tell you about the things that you're supposed to pay attention to. So it's this idea, we've always talked about Foursquare is this engine. It's like technologies that facilitates serendipity. And how do you manifest that on the phone? And we've been trying to do it by making your device buzz, making your phone buzz to alert you about things that you normally wouldn't know about.
Yeah. What's happening in the platform? Because I'm seeing Foursquare data used in Instagram and Path and all sorts of different apps.
Yeah.
Sonar and Banjo and probably, how many apps are using Foursquare?
Gosh, I don't even know the number off the top of my head, but I think the thing that's really interesting is that a lot of developers, everyone looks at Foursquare as oh, it's the service, it's recommendations, it's check-ins, it's game mechanics. And of course we've got the whole platform team that's powering a lot of the stuff, and all of our stuff is built on our own API. But we've got all these other developers are deciding that our location API is the best one that's out there. And because it's crowdsourced, it's up to date, there's lots of user-generated content in there. When a place closes, a super user in Paris will shut it down. When a new place opens in New York, someone will go and add it. And then it comes with all this social context as well, which is all you have to do is ask us for a given keyword and a given user ID, and then we can start returning targeted results instantly, right? Which is something that you don't get with some of the other location APIs. So we've been really satisfied to see how quickly that stuff's been adopting, and just the great feedback that we're getting from, as you're saying, Instagram and Path and Oink as well.
Yeah. What kinds of signals are you hoping to get from those other applications to help your machine language or machine learning bring back more interesting data to your users?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of folks are pulling off our API, and we need to start finding ways for them to push back in, right? So one of the things I'd love to see with an Instagram is, someone will take a photo of a milkshake, and I'm I want to eat that milkshake, I want that. And it's tagged with the location, which comes from the Foursquare API, but I want to say, this milkshake, remind me when I'm within a mile of this milkshake so I can get it. And that means the Instagram has to send us something, right? I think the same would apply to Path or Oink or really any of these other services.
Yeah.
We're starting to play around with that with this button that we launched called Save to Foursquare. I don't know if you guys saw this. We announced it about a week ago. And now, just if you read an article in the New York Times, there's a like button and there's a tweet button. And now for all the New York Times articles that are about locations or about specific places, there's a save button. So whenever you're reading something on your laptop about, hey, this is in Munich and I know I'm going to be in Munich 3 weeks from now, so let me save this. It goes right into my Foursquare account, and then when I get off the plane, Foursquare can remind me about that thing that I found a couple months ago. And this idea of bridging the online world and all the stuff that we do online with the way that we walk around the physical world, in the real world, that's a really big idea, and we seem to be pushing it really aggressively.
How are people changing because of your service? A lot of people had this initial reaction to Foursquare. Why would you do that? Why would you check in? Why would you tell people where you are?
Yeah.
But we're changing our behavior. My brother now is on Foursquare, right? And I never expected that he would be on it for years. But we're changing. How are we changing?
Yeah, well, I think it's, successful services change user behaviors. Facebook's done this, Twitter's done this. How foreign was it 2 years ago to tweet that, hey, I'm going to go exercise and want to join me? It just wasn't something that people thought about. Now they think about it all the time. I think Foursquare has conditioned a lot of people that hey, when you go to a new place, if you want to share that place, a great way to do it is through Foursquare. We're actually seeing a lot of users that check into places and they don't actually share they don't share it with Twitter, they don't share it with Facebook. They might not even share it with their friends on Foursquare. They just keep it for themselves because they want Foursquare to know about that, so the recommendation engine gets a little bit bigger. One of the most interesting things I think we're seeing is the percentage of people that are using the app but aren't checking it at all, right? We're seeing this number increase every month. And at first it's man, are we doing something wrong? Are we doing something right? And I think it's analogous to the way that Twitter paid attention to, hey, what's more important? Is the number of people tweeting or the number of people consuming those tweets? And I think what we're starting to do now that we have well over 1 billion check-ins, in our big data machine at Foursquare, that all of those check-ins are becoming very good at helping even new users figure out what they should do, like in their hometown or in a new city. So it turns into like, hey, I don't need to check in all the time. I can still kind of draft off everyone else's check-ins and benefit from a lot of the tips and some of the recommendations. Yeah.
What web people don't see because of this is the hard work of building a company. Tell me a little bit about what kind of company you're trying to build and what kind of values you're trying to build and bring to that. And would you ever sell to a bigger company again?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll tell you, the hardest part of this whole exercise is building the company. And I don't know if there's any entrepreneurs here or people that are going through this right now.
There's quite a few.
But yeah, it's like every time we add like 10 or 15 people, the company breaks. And I think it's common of all companies that go through this. Like from 5 to 10 people we broke, from 10 to 20 we broke. And it's a matter of like just making sure that there's enough product people matched up with enough engineers, there's enough designers matched up with enough product people. And when we don't get those ratios out, or when we don't get the ratios even, you run into bottlenecks, and that's what keeps breaking the company. And it's also like we're almost 100 people now. Like we have our headquarters in New York. We've got almost 20 people in San Francisco. We've got Omid, if you're here, our London and Europe representative. First time we've hired an employee in Europe, which is great. And so, keeping all those offices in check it's a difficult thing to do.
Do you talk about profitability, or is this going to be a question we're going to have for a few years? Are you ever going to make enough money to be profitable and not have to take another round of funding?
The profitability word doesn't come up so often in the office, but monetization does. And we think a lot about how do we take the tools that we built, the tools that that users are using, that people in this room are using on a regular basis, as well as like the merchants are using, and how are we going to put those two things together to make Foursquare a valuable long-term business. The amazing thing that we're seeing is like we don't have a sales force. We still have 600,000 merchants that are using the platform. And it's all spread through word of mouth. Like you take, I don't know if anyone here has claimed a business on Foursquare, but if you claim a business, you get access to the stats page, right? And if you show that stats page to a taco truck or a coffee shop, like they've never seen data like that. It's like, hey, here are all the customers that came in and checked in. Here's how influential they are. Like, hey, do you want to hit them up on Twitter or Facebook? If you want to, send them a message and tell them how great they are, and tell them to come back and give them a free cupcake. So there's that's just the beginning of it. Like we think of all the things that we're doing with our Explore recommendation engine right now. Like Explore is great at telling me what restaurants to go to in Paris, but we can actually go to an individual restaurant or a business owner and say, based on all of our check-in data, these are going to be your best customers. And that's crazy. No one's done that stuff before, and we're in a really good position to capitalize on it.
What's going to be the theme for the next year for you? What are you working with your machine learning to try to figure out a new pattern about location?
Yeah, so we're growing out this machine learning and big data teams. It's a big part of what we're doing as a company. I think it's funny, like the two, it seems like it's been forever since we launched these things, but Explore came just in March, and the Radar stuff just came in October. And I think those are the two big directions that we're going, right? So everyone still thinks of Foursquare as this check-in service. Like in the US, like you see TV ads for Verizon and AT&T, and they kind of like mention, hey, you can check in and be mayor of something, which is great because it's free publicity for Foursquare, but it doesn't really get to the essence of what we're doing. And I think what we're starting to get to is the point that like the app is really, really good at telling you the things that you should be doing, for recognizing when you're in an unfamiliar neighborhood and suggesting things that you might be interested in. And this is a problem, or like, it's a problem, it's like an opportunity, it's stuff that we've been interested in since grad school, since dodgeball. And like the reason we started Foursquare was to get another shot at trying to crack some of these questions. And like we're getting pretty good at it. And so I think by the, December now? Like if we're on the same stage next year, like I think we'll be, I think the stuff that we're doing now that's like blowing our minds internally will be in use by the rest of the people here.
What are your favorite apps that use Foursquare? I love food spotting, for instance. It's really useful here in France because a lot of the menus are only in French. So you pull out food spotting, you just look at pictures and go, I want this.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. I think my two favorites, and I've given this answer before because they're still my favorites, is Foursquare and 7 years ago, which is a service you sign up to and it just sends you an email and it's like, these are your check-ins from a year ago. And it doesn't sound super sexy, but when you get that email every morning, it's like, oh, guess what? You were at Disneyland last year and you checked in at all these rides. Oh, you were at Thanksgiving and here's the picture that you took of the, the townie bar in your hometown. Like that stuff it's kind of cool to get a reminder of that. Someone else built an app called Don't Eat At, which is, it's a combination of the, New York City opened up their, the health rating data for all the restaurants in New York. And so when you check into the place, they'll send you a text message immediately that says, you should not eat here because like the place only scored a C out of, on an A to F scale. So like, don't eat here, it's dangerous. Or this place is fantastic, you enjoy your meal. So, we're starting to see people using not just like the Foursquare data set, but like mashing it up with all these other interesting place and location data sets. And then kind of piggybacking off the check-in. The check-in is something that people do when they go to a place, and then a lot of developers use that as a trigger to say, hey, send this user something interesting that's going to make their, their next 15 or 20 minutes a little bit more interesting.
Well, thank you so much. We're out of time. It's been a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing you next year.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you back.